9,600 BC. On a barren hilltop in what is now southeastern Turkey, hands without metal tools moved 20-ton stones into perfect circles. No cities existed yet, no writing, no wheels. Then, when they were finished, they buried all of it. Deliberately, completely, every stone. Who were these people? What were they building toward? And what did they need the world to forget? In this chapter of Overmind, we descend into the world's oldest temple. Welcome to Overmind. September 1994. A Kurdish shepherd follows his flock across a dry, wind-scoured hilltop in southeastern Turkey, as thousands of shepherds before him had done for generations. He kicks at something half buried in the soil, a stone, but not like the others. This one is flat, deliberately shaped, cut. It is too smooth, too intentional. He moves on and thinks nothing more of it. But 12 miles northeast of the ancient city of Şanlıurfa, buried beneath centuries of sediment, wind-blown soil, and absolute silence, something was waiting. Archaeologist Klaus Schmidt arrived the following year. He had seen the site referenced in a 1963 survey, a brief, dismissive mention of a hilltop scattered with flint. He came expecting little. What he found on that unremarkable ridge above the Şanlıurfa plains would not merely rewrite a chapter of history, it would shatter the entire framework by which we understood human civilization. Göbekli Tepe, a name that, before 1994, appeared in no history book, no academic journal, no major documentary. And yet the structures beneath this soil are older, far older than anything we believed our ancestors were capable of building. Stonehenge stands as one of humanity's most celebrated ancient monuments. Constructed roughly 5,000 years ago, the Egyptian pyramids are barely 4,000 years old. Göbekli Tepe is 6,000 years older than Stonehenge, 12,000 years old, built at the very end of the last ice age. Let that land for a moment. The people who raised these stones, who quarried and moved 20-ton limestone pillars, who carved intricate animals into their surfaces without metal tools, without wheels, without any form of written language, they were not farmers, they were not city dwellers. They had no kings, no governments, no permanent settlements of any kind. They were hunter-gatherers. For more than a century, the story of civilization followed a sequence that seemed almost self-evident. First came agriculture, humans learning to farm, to stay in one place. From settlement came surplus. From surplus came specialization. From specialization came religion, monuments, organized society. Step by step, each stage enabling the next. Göbekli Tepe did not fit that sequence. It obliterated it entirely. Here, 12,000 years ago, before a single seed had been deliberately planted anywhere on Earth, before the concept of a city had formed in any human mind, a group of nomadic people gathered on this hilltop in what is now southeastern Turkey. And they built something that required coordination across enormous numbers of people, sustained across generations, something that defies every assumption we carried about what hunter-gatherers were capable of imagining, let alone achieving. The symbols carved into these pillars, strange animals, abstract geometric shapes, repeated patterns appearing across separate enclosures, centuries apart, have not yet been fully deciphered. Linguists, archaeologists, and cognitive scientists continue to argue about what they mean, who placed them there, and why certain creatures appear again and again. What we do know is this: the builders were deliberate, precise. They returned here again and again over thousands of years. And when they were finished, they buried all of it. Every pillar, every enclosure, every carved animal under thousands of tons of rubble. and fill. They sealed what they had built so completely, so methodically, that it would remain undiscovered for over 100 centuries. No credible explanation has ever been offered for why, but that act of burial, deliberate, total, permanent, tells us something about these people that changes everything we thought we understood about the human story. Before Göbekli Tepe, we thought we understood the sequence of things. Civilization came first. The farms, the villages, the surplus of grain that gave people time to think, to plan, to build. Religion and ritual followed. That was the story. Neat, logical, agreed upon. Then came the stones. Carbon dating doesn't lie. The sediment layers at Göbekli Tepe place its construction at approximately 9,600 BCE, not 3,000 BCE, the age of the pyramids, not 2,500 BCE, the age of Stonehenge. We are talking about a structure raised to the sky 6,000 years before Stonehenge existed, as anything more than open grassland.
For 6,000 years. Let that settle.
And the people who built it, according to every model of human development we had constructed over the previous century, should not have been capable of this. They were hunter-gatherers, no permanent settlements, no agriculture, no organized labor in any form we had recognized. They followed herds. They moved with seasons. They did not, in theory, build anything that required the coordinated effort of hundreds of people across decades. Theory, it turned out, needed revision. The T-shaped pillars themselves are a language no one has fully learned to read. Carved into their limestone faces, foxes, cranes, scorpions, vultures, aurochs, not random decoration. The repetition is too deliberate. Certain animals appear only in certain enclosures. Certain symbols cluster in configurations that recur across structures built generations apart. Some researchers believe the pillars represent beings, not animals, not abstract symbols, but figures. The T-shape itself may be a stylized human form, the crossbar a pair of shoulders, the shaft a body, arms carved in relief along the sides, hands folded at the front. If that reading is correct, and a growing number of archaeologists believe it is, then Göbekli Tepe is not a hunting shrine or a feast hall. It is a gathering place of ancestral spirits, a temple to the dead, or perhaps to something older than the concept of death itself. And then, at some point between 7,000 and 8,000 years ago, the people who built all of this made a decision that archaeology still cannot explain. They filled it in, thousands of tons of sediment, animal bones, flint tools, carefully packed around structures that had taken generations to raise, not abandoned, not destroyed, buried, intentionally, completely. The question that has haunted every researcher who has stood on this hill is not how they built it, it is why they chose to make it disappear. Consider what the engineers of Göbekli Tepe actually had. No metal tools, no domesticated animals to haul stone, no written language to record measurements or coordinate labor, no wheel. These are not poetic flourishes. They are documented archaeological facts. And yet, what they left behind required all of these things, or so we assumed. The T-shaped pillars of Göbekli Tepe average 4 meters in height. The largest reach 6. They weigh between 10 and 20 metric tons each. The quarry where they were cut sits 300 meters away, downhill on approach, uphill on return. Every single stone had to be hauled upright across broken terrain. Modern engineers, given these constraints, say it is possible, barely, with hundreds of coordinated workers, sophisticated rope systems, and months of sustained effort per pillar. That level of coordination requires hierarchy, planning, social structure. But the people who built Göbekli Tepe were hunter-gatherers. This is the word that stops archaeologists cold. Not farmers with surplus grain to feed a workforce. Not city dwellers with administrators and record keepers. Hunter-gatherers, people who, according to every model we had constructed about human development, simply were not capable of this kind of organized, sustained, monumental effort. Göbekli Tepe is not a settlement. There are no hearths, no storage pits, no evidence of permanent habitation. People did not live here. They came here, repeatedly, deliberately, from distances we cannot yet measure, to build something they would never call home. And the symbols they carved into the stone refused to give up their meaning. The foxes, the vultures, the headless figures, the abstract H-shapes and crescent forms, 12,000 years of silence. Linguists and archaeologists have spent decades circling this vocabulary. We recognize the grammar of intention. We cannot read the words. This matters because Göbekli Tepe does not fit inside our timeline. It sits 6,000 years before Stonehenge, older than the first Egyptian dynasty by 7 millennia, older than writing, older than agriculture, or, and here is the hypothesis that fractures the old framework, perhaps agriculture came asterisk after asterisk this place, not before it. Klaus Schmidt proposed that the temple came first, that it was the act of building this place, the coordination, the ritual, the returning, that created the social pressure for agriculture, that we did not build temples because we had surplus. We created surplus because we needed to keep building the temple. If he was right, then everything we have taught about human civilization, the sequence, the causes, the direction of progress, requires revision, not refinement, not addition. Revision. And the people who built it buried it, deliberately, completely, under thousands of tons of fill before they left. They did not abandon it. They interred it, like something that had served its purpose, or something that needed to be hidden. The question has been sitting at the center of every excavation, every academic paper, every late-night argument in university offices around the world. Who built Göbekli Tepe, and why? We know a few things with certainty. The people who built this place were hunter-gatherers. They had no agriculture, no permanent settlements, no written language. By every framework we trusted, every model we built to understand human progress, they should not have been capable of this. And yet here it is, enclosure after enclosure, pillar after pillar, each one quarried, shaped, and raised without the wheel, without metal tools, without any of the organizational machinery we once assumed was a prerequisite for civilization itself. So the question is not just who. The question is, what kind of society produces something like this? Archaeologists estimate that carving a single T-shaped pillar, one pillar, required weeks of sustained coordinated labor. There are more than 200 of them. Someone organized that effort. Someone kept people fed, motivated, and returning to this hilltop season after season, decade after decade. Some researchers now believe Göbekli Tepe was never home to one people. It may have been a gathering site, a sacred access point that drew pilgrims from hundreds of kilometers in every direction, a spiritual center for a vast, mobile population that had no city, no state, yet shared something powerful enough to move mountains, literally, religion, ritual, belief. The carvings deepen the problem. Foxes, vultures, scorpions, aurochs, snakes coiling around pillar shafts. These are not decorations. They are not random. Scholars believe they encode something, a cosmology, a mythology, a set of convictions so fundamental that they had to be pressed into stone before they could be lost. But we cannot read them. Not fully. Not yet. 12,000 years of silence, and we are still standing at the edge of something we cannot name. And then there is the question that sits beneath all the others, the one that no one has answered cleanly. They buried it, deliberately, methodically. Not one enclosure, all of them. Thousands of tons of earth, flint, and animal bone, carefully deposited, layer by layer, until the entire complex was sealed beneath the hillside and erased from the surface of the world. Why would you build something this extraordinary and then bury it? Some believe the burial was preservation, a way of protecting the sacred from a world not ready to receive it. Others argue it was ritual completion, that sealing the site was always the plan, the final ceremony in a sequence that had taken generations to perform. But there is a third possibility, one that grows harder to dismiss the longer you stand here, that the builders of Göbekli Tepe understood what they had made, and understood too that the world around them was changing in ways they could not stop. So they looked at everything they had carved, everything they believed, everything they had poured into these stones across generations of effort, and they chose to save it the only way they knew how. They weren't hiding it from us, they were keeping it for us. They didn't abandon it. That distinction matters more than it might seem. When civilizations fall, when cities burn or empires collapse, the people leave, they scatter, they run. But whoever built Göbekli Tepe did something deliberate, something almost unthinkable. They filled it in, by hand. Thousands of tons of earth, broken flint, animal bone, poured over their own creation with intent and care. This was not neglect, this was a burial. Archaeologists have tried for decades to explain it. Perhaps a new religion replaced the old one. Perhaps the site had served its purpose. Perhaps the burial itself was the ritual, a final, sacred act of closure performed by the very people who built it. But here is what no theory adequately answers. They were hunter-gatherers. They had no cities, no writing, no wheel, and yet they organized thousands of workers, quarried and lifted 20-ton stones, and carved symbols onto those stones, symbols we still cannot fully read. Göbekli Tepe is not 600 years older than Stonehenge, not 1,000, it is 6,000 years older. 6,000 years before those famous stones were raised in England, these pillars already stood, already carved, already arranged in perfect geometric circles on a windswept hill above the Harran Plain. Every historian who has studied this site arrives at the same uncomfortable conclusion. Our timeline is wrong. The story we tell about the rise of human civilization, the one that begins with agriculture, then cities, then monuments, does not survive contact with this hill. And still, the symbols on the pillars wait. Thousands of glyphs, geometric patterns, repeating forms that appear at sites across thousands of miles of the ancient world. Researchers have proposed they map a comet impact, that they encode astronomical events, that they are something closer to language than decoration. No one agrees, no one truly knows. But in 2018, researchers from Edinburgh University published something quietly extraordinary. They ran the symbols through computational analysis, pattern recognition, positional frequency, structural logic. What they found was not random decoration. What they found looked like recording, like memory, like someone 12,000 years ago, standing on this hill above the plain, was trying to warn us. And the message, if that is what it is, remains sealed inside the stone, waiting for someone who knows how to listen. 9,600 BC. On a barren hilltop in what is now southeastern Turkey, hands without metal tools moved 20-ton stones into perfect circles. No cities existed yet, no writing, no wheels. Then, when they were finished, they buried all of it. Deliberately, completely, every stone. Who were these people? What were they building toward? And what did they need the world to forget? In this chapter of Overmind, we descend into the world's oldest temple. Welcome to Overmind.